American poker player who could quite happily spend the whole month of September travelling through Europe for a month that will ultimately end in London for the World Series of Poker Europe, begins in a slightly more bizarre location in Cannes in the south of France for an event which is effectively the French Poker Tour final. The polite word for the standard would be mixed. Indeed it is, because at the top a lot of the Americans have made it across, as well as top players from all over the place. But towards the bottom of the field, then some of the plays I saw yesterday were pretty shocking, and especially for such a big buy-in event, and it made for an enjoyable day, but one that by the end of it was exhausting after 11 hours of play, and unfortunately that will be trumped today as we go another hour, hopefully, and play 12 hours. That was the only downside of what is a fantastic structure with 30,000 starting chips. And that meant for the first few hours of play, really, despite some interesting pots, I hardly shifted between kind of 28 and 34 or something like that. And then after about 4 hours, the big significant pot did come, and it went like this. The weaker stand of the play meant it was possible to pick up on a lot of tells, and that actually really changes kind of the nature of pots. And in this particular pot, then there were tells going all around me. I was sitting on the button, and the player to my left, the small blind, couldn't look any less interested. It really seems he's going to pass his cards. The player to my right, the cut-off, he's almost passed already as it comes to the girl on the hijack. And she didn't seem interested, but it seems to have picked up on this, so raises. And if I don't 3-bet here, then it's almost a crime against poker, really. So I had to 3-bet my 6-5 of hearts. She's made it 9, I think it's 22. And then something bizarre happens. The player in the small blind, who was supposed to pass, now cold calls the 3-bet, which completely takes me by surprise. Anyway, the read was half right, because he has actually only got King 10 off suit, but that's an example of the kind of plays that were happening yesterday. So this isn't too bad a got position, and it gets a little better with 6 of hearts as the flop comes. King of hearts, 9 of hearts, 2 of hearts, and I flop the low flush. He checks, I bet 2,500, he check raises to 8, and I know this has probably committed him, so I ship it for 11 more. And he kind of sighs and calls, and yes, the bad news is he does have the 10 of hearts, and they carry out the stacks and put what would be my remaining stack in front of me, which is about 8,000, and I thought, please don't do it. But I managed to sweat the 6 outs, and I think if you're going to whinge about bad beats, which I sometimes do, then it's so important to note the bad beats that you escape, because to be honest, if the turn was for a heart there, that might have just been the worst bad beat yet. So that sent me shooting up, and the rest of the day was pretty mixed with it. I played a couple of interesting points against Noah Helmut, who wants to be open, really good at the table. But he just played quite solid yesterday, which made it a lot easier to kind of deal with such a table. Early on I raised 8 King Jack 9, I bet 400 he calls. Turns out with King Jack was 2 pair. Anyway, I chucked him on the turn by hitting an 8. There's now 2,000 in the pot, and I made completely the wrong bet by polarising my range and bet 2k. And he pretty quickly passes his King Jack, and passes it face up as well, which is particularly interesting that he's going to show me he's playing that tight. And it's a good pass, but one actually, if you think about it, he should be making, because what can King Jack beat there against 2 barrels? But that later on, that meant that when a fishy player raised 1,200 and he called 1,200, I called for the big blind with 5-3 of clubs. Nice flop of King 7-4 all clubs. We both checked to him, and he bet 2,000, and I thought I have to check raise here, so check raise to 6,200, and he had a long think and passed. And then a few hands later I pick up aces against him for the first time all day. I raise, he calls, and we get a beautiful flop actually of King. It's not quite as good as 2-2-2, but it's a flop on which I have to get a lot of value. But for a player that showed he's going to play quite solid and be capable of making such good passes, how do I play it here? Often I would fire 1, check the turn and fire the river, because that's definitely going to get me paid 2, but I thought I might try and get paid 3. So I fire 2,000 call, turn obviously a blank, fire 5,500 call, river another blank, and now it really feels like he's basically got a bluff catcher, a pair of 3s or something like that. And I think actually what I have to do here is polarise my range to 16k in the pot, and if I bet 8,000, it's such an obvious value bet that he's going to make another good pass. If I polarise my range, I've got a chance, so I bet 50,000, and then we have a bizarre 8-9 minutes, the first 5 of which he just thinks. And after about 5, someone understandably decides they're going to call the clock on him. No clock. Another minute later, call the clock again. No clock. And no one's got a clue what's happening. And whose first thing seems to be to pass, seems to be gradually tempting himself more and more into calling, but we still have this conclusion of the clock. And then suddenly one of the French officials turns up and says 10 seconds. Which was just unbelievable, because any clock starts with a minute. 10 seconds, 5 seconds, 4, 3, 2, 1, and you are kind of confused and passed it. And I don't know whether he would have called, probably not, but I think if he'd had a proper clock on him, he would have had a shot of thinking himself into calling there. So that was a big disappointment, to be honest, but a reasonable one. Anyway, as you can tell, we're in the taxi going back for day 2, which starts very soon. We're going back with 53,000 and another update at the end of the day. Okay.